This is Edward Ed Adler, otherwise known as Macro Ed, talking about reviving US manufacturing. Now, we've already discussed 3 of the 4 origins for what Macro Ed believes are the decline in manufacturing in our country. They were, of course, FOCs, family-owned companies, the economic crisis caused by the high price of oil, which increased the cost of manufacturing, reduced markets and access to those markets. And last time we spoke about the Japanese invasion, particularly with consumer durable products, ranging over 5 stages, but a variable amount of times. And once again, macro and macro ed stands for macros, a series of commands in Excel that performs incisive cost analysis and capital expenditure evaluations and reduces repetitive tasks in Excel spreadsheet work. So the tide is in, and let's move on to the 4th and final reason for the decline in manufacturing in the United States, and that is incompetent financial personnel. Okay, now this is a time frame roughly of 1960 to late 1980s, and there are 4 areas: family-owned companies, investment bankers, vulture capitalists, and large and medium-sized corporations. So, to begin with, family-owned companies, once again referred to as FOCs. The problem here with incompetent financial personnel is they generally hired a relative, either a member from the immediate family or the extended family, in order to keep the money within the family. Yeah. Now, relatives thought they could easily analyze the numbers, and they believed they were entitled to this family management position because it was an extension of family birthright, and they were part of the royal family that was just duly entitled to control and run the company. But little did they really know that there was a lot more to this. And therefore, when they realized it was much more complex, they tried to obtain free work from company auditors and consultants and contractors like, that's right, Macro Ed, and we figured that out very quickly. They also did not have the work ethic that the company founders had. They tended to be 9-to-5 guys, and they personally tended to be spoiled, selfish, and manipulative. What ends up, they couldn't perform the cost analysis and capital expenditures work, so that these FOCs became extremely vulnerable to acquisition, and eventually many of them were acquired, as we've spoken about before, and production then declined precipitously. Second area was investment banks, and they pursued manufacturing firms as a power play. They sought the valuable assets so that they could sell them to another company. They mistakenly believed, that their Ivy League credentials made them essentially qualified to perform any kind of work. And this was not true, because their erroneous approach was just people cost, reduce headcount, cut salaries, and so forth. And their MO, their modus operandi, was always trying to eliminate older people and hire younger people instead. They would compel their white-collar people to put amounts of overtime, multitask as much as possible, and squeeze everything out, whether it's health benefits, cafeteria benefits, and offer, frivolous benefits like an autos room in lieu of higher salaries. They refused once again to hire qualified financial personnel, and this is what happened. A case in point, an investment bank firm on the East Coast had purchased a consumer products company in the western portion of the United States. And they had their Ivy League credentials that tried to get Macro Ed to provide a sample of his work every 2 weeks until they could decide whether they needed Macro Ed. Well, I was a little too smart for that. I could connect the dots. What eventually happened is that they ended up selling the company, and the production was reduced again enormously. The third area is vulture capitalists. Now, vulture capitalists are investors that acquire, and I'm reading this, distressed firms in the hopes of making them more profitable and to ultimately sell them at a profit. The modus operandi one is they acquire the firm, then they fire workers to reduce costs in order to raise profitability on their gain, and vulture capitalists pay only 15% on their profits. Now, again, they make that erroneous approach that all they have to do is reduce headcount, people cost, as to improve profit margins, okay? Their modus operandi, too, is, they get older people out of there and bring in younger people. They, too, compel white-collar salaried staff to put in substantial amounts of overtime and to wear 12 different hats in positions and work and to multitask as much as possible. Okay, the attempt to squeeze every dollar out of company personnel, whether it's health benefits, cafeteria benefits, increase meal prices, diminish food quality and food portions, and then, of course, the frivolous benefits, like a Nautilus room, or if you're lucky, you might get a birthday cake instead of higher salaries. And that's what we all need, is another birthday cake. The final outcome, they reap the rewards. But they also, by selling the company, they reduce the manufacturing presence of the company, and much of it ends up outside of the United States. The fourth and final area are large and medium-sized companies, and the LNMCs, as we'll call them. And this is an area which is more critical and strategic and more complex. Now, what these companies did during this time frame was hire a lot of basic accountants. They didn't have a lot of qualifications in cost analysis or capital expenditures because they weren't hired for that. They were hired, one, to perform only the basic and legally required accounting work, okay? They were hired to fulfill year-end requirements by law, such as fulfilling SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission requirements, federal government, state laws for reporting income, profits, and so forth, okay? They were hired not to dig up cost overruns and identify them and resolve them. But more than that, they were hired, and most importantly, they were hired to manipulate financial results and cover up cost overruns in order for executives to earn higher compensation and higher bonuses. And these individuals tended to be provincial, ignorant, ill-mannered, deceitful, and hired subordinates like themselves, birds of a feather. They manipulated production costs by creative accounting. They place these incremental accounts, cost overruns, and suspicious accounts such as miscellaneous interest and other expenses, or they place the cost overruns of various manufacturing facilities in suspicious accounts such as international operations expenses, worldwide adjustment accounts. My favorite one would be, let's just say XYZ Company, OC, XYZ Overseas Company. And all of a sudden, they had a terrible expense amount involved here. Where did those expenses come from? Nobody seems to know. But the rank and file will pay for it in lower compensation, lower health benefits, and much more overtime. So this is what happened. And eventually, management lays off people. They reduce their salaries, their bonuses, and of course, they implement one of their favorite tricks, a hiring freeze. That will really solve the problem, okay? They reduce personal vacation days and product discounts and other nickel and dime procedures in order to cover up for the cost overruns, okay? Now, again, the company performs a lot of overtime. The profits decline precipitously and revenues decline also. Cost analysis and capital project evaluations, productivity analysis are badly performed, and therefore, again, management issues layoffs and reduces divisions or shutters plants entirely. So here again, we see the cost of manufacturing go up and the level of production go down. And then there's the watershed year, 1987. Finally, the advent of companies accept the personal computer. From there, the old expression, garbage in, garbage out. Companies now see they can't manipulate the results as they used to manually. So a lot of these people were finally dismissed from the company, and companies started improving gradually on their cost analysis and other productivity and capital expenditure analysis. But then there was one final culmination of all these incompetent financial personnel problems. And that's what McElroy refers to as the cost accounting massacre. This took place in the early mid-1970s to the middle 1980s. The origin, late 1970s, many companies, large and middle, in the Northeast, Midwest particularly, hired cost accountants to identify, monitor, analyze, resolve cost overruns, which was the right thing to do. However, there was an ulterior motive. And that ulterior motive was to have non-financial personnel such as engineers, marketing, sales personnel work side by side with these cost accountants so they could pick their brains, get the information, and work with these cost accountants 1 to a maximum 3 years. Okay, and to learn all the aspects of basic accounting. And they believed that they could learn all this and they could steal this cost accountant's work, pick their brains, and then wouldn't need them anymore. And after a maximum of 3 years, there was an enormous number of cost accountants that were dismissed from companies because these engineers, marketing, and sales personnel thought they could run the numbers, but they didn't see beyond the initial numbers. They could cover their tracks and cover their mistakes, and of course earn additional compensation. And they eliminate any chance of financial personnel digging up or identifying and resolving any cost overruns that might perniciously affect their standing with the company and the bottom line. Take, for instance, a company issues a booking. A booking is usually 25-30% down payment for a sale of a product. And at first you think it's going to record a product, but since they do not know how to perform proper cost analysis, at the end of the road, when all the costs are tallied up, the product sale records a loss instead of a profit. As a result, there's devastating outcomes. Again, cost analysis, capital expenditures produce disastrous results. Manufacturing costs increase enormously. Even sales revenues decline. Quality control suffers dramatically. Manufacturing collapses, and it collapses even more, which is something we will talk about at a later date, when companies arrive at a decision whether to stop regular production when they have a special order. Should they hire more people? Should they stop regular production? Should they work overtime? Because they don't have the qualified personnel to analyze the scenario. As it ends up, there's substantial layoffs ensue. Production facilities, product divisions are eliminated. Production facilities are shuttered. Manufacturing companies end up being acquired. And for the fourth major time of origins, our US manufacturing declines and reduces its presence in our company. So now we've discussed all 4 areas of that. And next time we'll discuss the status of financial personnel from the late 1980s, early 1990s, all the way up to the present time. And they're all how it's improved, but there's still a substantial room for improvement. And then we'll go on to cover cost, we'll cover product cost, product recalls rather, and we'll cover why cosmetics and prescription drug prices are high, and look at raw materials, commodity costs, packaging material, and so forth. So the tide is out, and it's time for Macro Ed once again to ride out into the sunset. Catch you at the next high tide.